Hi, all. Today, once again, we're talking with my father. Hi, Dad.
I am here.
All right, good. And I thought that the conversation today to reach out and talk about is about health and about when you were growing up, the issues of measles, mumps, and polio. Those are all viruses, and for those people that don't know, because basically they've all been eradicated now, they very much affected the world during that time. Just to give you some statistics, in the 40s and 50s, before the serum, 40,000 people a year in the U.S. would get polio. And polio, for those that don't know, is a virus that causes temporary or permanent paralysis, including up to death. Of course, the most famous person to get polio is probably FDR, and he hid it from the public for years, but it totally debilitating. Measles and mumps, which we all laugh at today, globally, 7 to 8 million children a year would die of. It was the pandemic of its time, but it was basically a disease of the youth. And all of these were eradicated in the 60s with the scientific community coming together to create vaccines. And the interesting thing also to note is that the research today to cure the coronavirus is basically following the same path that it was in using to cure the polio and measles, which is how do you deal with viruses. But what I want to do is I want to go back in time to you, Dad, because when you were growing up and you had to face all these and there were no vaccines, people really didn't know what was going on. So what was it like? Let's talk about measles and mumps first. What was it like? Did you get them, or how did your family even handle it?
Back when I was a young boy, measles was quite apparent. There were different kinds of measles, and some were terrible, but I remember just as a small boy living in our house there where we were renting out rooms. In our room, we had to place a sign on the door that measles, so that people couldn't come and I couldn't get out of my room. I had to stay, as I remember, for maybe a week or so, and measles seemed to go away at young people. But it was very apparent that this was something that shouldn't occur. And of course, a lot of research was done during those years, and it kept going. And then, of course, mumps was even worse. And you would find that if you had mumps, it was really not so good. And a lot of kids particularly got mumps. And but that also, they would have a sign up in the early days. As I recall, later on, they didn't put signs up. They just, somehow you were informed and did not have to do that, but it was still with us for years. The worst, of course, was the polio. Now, this was a bad situation. In fact, I was a little boy. In Salt Lake City, a block and a half from me, there was this hospital with all these young children in it that had polio, and it would affect them. And how it would affect them, it would affect them permanently. They could never use their legs again, a lot of them, and it was really a sad thing. So when I went to school, I had to walk past that hospital, and I was always afraid that something could happen. But I was fortunate nothing did. But as you know, when you said FDR, I don't know some of the people don't even know who FDR is. FDR was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of our greatest presidents, and he was the president during the Great Depression of the 30s and into World War II, and really made it possible for us to win World War II. And he died just before the armistice. But anyway, he had polio and could hardly walk, but he would work with these canes and stuff that he had. And he was amazing because he always had someone there sort of standing by him to help him. But he was an amazing man. And so that was a very big deal at the time. And they were doing everything they could to find out how to solve this problem. And eventually they came out with a virus where they would give you a shot. And all the kids after that time, and I know even then at that age, we all got shots to not get polio because you could get it even older. And it was a terrible disease. It affected the whole world. And believe it or not, there's still some of it in some of the areas of the Middle East and Africa.
I want to talk about back when you were a kid, because I think it's important that people understand how you went through it and what was your spirit like going through this. So when you had, back in your time, mumps, measles, and you got quarantined, how did your family do it? How did your mom deal with the fact that you were quarantined? You were living with your brother, so where did he live? What did you guys do?
I think we both got it. As I recall, I don't know. I think we both got it. So we had to stay in our room, and when we just stayed there for the 5 or 6 days, it wasn't quite as bad as a result. You didn't die as easily as you can apparently with this present.
Right, but the mumps that you guys had they could leave scars on you forever, because I thought mumps and measles.
And I don't remember whether I had mumps or not. I know I had 2 different things that I was quarantined for as a young guy. Listen, that's only it's only 80 years ago, so my memory is not so good. But I will tell you, the one thing it does show is that when people are united, working together, and listening to the proper authorities, we can overcome this. I know as a boy, it was just something so frightening when you see someone that you knew all of a sudden they've ended up with this polio, and it was so awful to see one of your friends who couldn't walk or something anymore.
Did you have any friends? Did you know anyone that actually got polio?
Yeah, I did, one boy.
And did you go visit him, or was it so scary?
You wouldn't go near him. No. I wouldn't go. When I walked past that hospital, I was at least a half a block away. Nobody would go near the hospital. You follow? So
the sad thing about that is those polio people were totally isolated because there was such a fear of how they would get it. It's almost like the lepers, right, with the leper colony back then. And I mean, it must have been very scary.
Well, it was scary, but what I'm trying to say is that we have that same thing today, and we have to know its limitations and realize that we're going to go through some pretty awful times now.
I want to go back to when you were a kid and how you were dealing with that issue.
We did the same thing as we're doing now. We stayed in the house, and friends would bring a church food, and my mother was always able to go out. And apparently those diseases, a lot of them the older people didn't get some of the mumps or the
measles.
Yeah, but anybody could get polio, and nobody quite knew how they got it.
Right. So
that was very frightening. Everybody's worried about it, and then particularly when you realize that FDR hid it very much, so people didn't realize that he really had this. They knew he'd gotten it, but somehow he was there and ran for president, and he was an amazing person.
So in the end, FDR is actually an example of, again, the spirit of the U.S. and people all over the world, which is, from adversity comes strength. And you can take something as crippling as this, but it doesn't hold you down.
No, and he's considered one of our greatest presidents because he overcame it and he wouldn't let it get him down. And the amazing thing is that if you listen to some of the things he said, and I think you've got some quotes of his, that's what I'm trying to say to our people. Don't give up. Just work with everybody you can and listen to what they're telling you. Because if you do listen and do it, the likelihood is that we're all going to come out of this better, stronger, and a better company.
Yeah. And one other thing is, your mom was certainly the head of the family at that time. Was she a rock through this whole thing? How was she as a nurse?
Well, she was terrific because she seemed to know what to do, and she was just an incredible person. She took care of us, got food. We had when you're young boys, and as I recall, if it were in the winter, it would have been even worse because we had coal stoves and we had to have coal and warm us and the coal for a heater. And so you have to go out and get the coal, which is having a shed. There was a lot of different things in those days. That's a whole different thing than the way we live today.
And I'm sure you were a perfect patient back then with your mom.
I think I was a perfect patient. I was a brat.
But your brother wasn't.
My brother was much better than me. But I couldn't have stood myself, frankly. However,
you couldn't what?
Still trying to put up with me. So that's
Was there any like family medications or medicines that your mom would make just to ward off things?
Well, they had these medicines that you took, and I don't know what they were, but they sure were awful when you have to take 2 or 3 spoonfuls. I don't know.
None of them had alcohol or gin or whiskey or anything?
I'm sure they had something in them, but the worse they tasted, supposed to cure you was the easiest thing. But anyway, we took medicine. Yeah, later on, we got the shots, which was everybody hated it, but you got the shots, and then pretty soon you were immune from some of this.
Right. And there's a story that you had an allergic reaction to one of the shots, right?
Oh, I think that there was, but a lot of people sometimes did have an allergic, and I don't think it was me, was it? I don't remember, frankly.
But it was.
I was sick for quite a while one time, I imagine, a couple of months.
Yeah, you got the shot and you were allergic reaction to it, which was also a test case. So, which again just shows you that, as you roll out these things, nothing's perfect, right? It takes its time to incubate and everything else. But again, right. History does repeat itself, and we're in that process now. Whether it's this virus or other virus, the lessons learned seem to be pretty much the same. Quarantine yourself, have a great mother, drink some crazy remedies, and stay strong.
You're absolutely right. The main thing is if your family is warm, and it's just terrific because they're the only ones you can really depend on, and your closest friends couldn't come and see you even. So that's the way it was. But we all have to work together, and we all have to make it possible for those people who are lonely and alone to be taken care of. That's what we have to do.
And we can't be afraid of those people that, like you said, in the polio hospital. We can't be afraid of those people. They need us more than ever, and it's very scary. Well, again, I appreciate you taking the time for the conversations, the fireside chats, and love you. And until next week, stay safe.
Okay, well, I will, and I just want to thank all of our people for the hard work they're doing and under very tough times. Unfortunately, that we had to be in a different building, and I just appreciate all those in our other places, and I want to thank them all personally for allowing me to stay at home and do my work here. So thank you. Thanks a lot, Tim. You're a good son, but I don't want anybody to know that I said that, okay?
Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.